Who comes out on top, the Black Bay 58 or the Tudor Pelagos? We'll find out. So the Tudor Pelagos and the Black Bay 58 have a lot of things in common. Obviously, they're both being from Tudor, they're both dive watches, and they're both far more capable than they need to be for what they're going to do. But they have some different design elements, and for that, they end up fitting into a collection in two very different ways. First, I want to cover the basic. So the Tudor Black Bay 58, this is the navy blue version on the bracelet. This one is 39 millimeters wide. It's 11.9 millimeters in thickness. It has a 200 meter water resistance rating, an aluminum bezel insert. The whole thing's made out of stainless steel. It has one of Tudor's in-house movements, a 70-hour power reserve, and a COSC certified movement. It has a traditional bracelet, milled bracelet with no bracelet adjustment system. And the Black Bay 58 retails for $3,800. In the other corner, we have the Tudor Pelagos. This is 42 millimeters wide. It is 50 millimeters lug to lug. It's 14.3 millimeters thick. It also has a COSC certified Tudor movement that has a 70-hour power reserve. The whole thing's made out of titanium, and it has an on-the-fly adjustment system. It also has a ceramic bezel insert that is loomed. The Tudor Pelagos also has a date function, whereas the Black Bay 58 does not. The Tudor Pelagos retails for $47.25 right now. So if we're looking at these two watches, they strike me as different in their design intent. So I can kind of talk about the differences in overall design, and most of them are immediately apparent. First off, the Black Bay 58 being made out of stainless steel means that it has a little bit more of your typical presence that you're going to find on a dive watch. This one is actually a little thinner than you're typically going to find on a dive watch, so it's going to have a nice vintage element between the domed sapphire, the aluminum bezel, the lume pip being a pearl, and the fact that it has the traditional sort of look that you would find on a traditional Tudor or traditional Rolex watch. It's going to give you sort of that vintage feel with a little bit more of an elegant appearance. The Tudor Pelagos, on the other hand, is going to look like a modern diver that looks like it's ready to be used and abused. This whole thing being made out of titanium actually makes the thickness and the overall size of the watch wear very similar to the Black Bay 58. This one is 143 grams, whereas the Black Bay 58 is 133 grams when they're both sized up for my 6 3/4 inch wrist. If you're in the market to look at dive watches, these immediately are the two that most people are going to think about this day and age, as well as obviously some others. But if you're looking at the Tudor family, these are the two that most people are going to talk about most often, the 58 and the Pelagos. And they obviously bring two very different feels, and they fit into collections a lot differently. So when I look at these two watches, what I actually think about is the Rolex Omega battle that was happening in the mid 20th century. And that's because the Black Bay 58 to me looks like a more polished sort of watch. It looks like something that could be used as a dress watch as well as something that you could wear every day more casually. And so for me, what this ends up looking like is more like Omega's stance at that time frame, meaning that what they were trying to do was create an elegant timepiece that did the function, but also looked nice on the wearer's wrist. Between the polished surfaces on the sides and the aluminum bezel insert with the lume pip at the top, as well as the applied indices, it gives you an overall feel of a more elegant package, of something that is going to fit into a collection and be able to use for any function whatsoever. The Pelagos has a very different aspect to it. This looks more like what I would have expected from Rolex in the mid 20th century, meaning that it looks scrappy. It looks like something that they would use in order to serve a purpose. This looks more like something that someone would wear because they know that they could put it through anything and it would be perfectly fine. At least from a design element, that is immediately what stands out to me, is that this is a watch that you could just put on and forget about it. You could do anything in the world and it's going to be just fine. And I think for me at least, that scrappy heritage is something that I think is appealing about the Pelagos as opposed to the 58. When I first got this in for review, I was immediately struck by the overall design. It seemed very well simplified, meaning that everything was where it should go and there wasn't something geometrically or in terms of relationship of one thing to another that I thought was off. For example, when I look at the indices on the Black Bay 58, the circular indices with the snowflake hands, it always looks a little off to me. And maybe that's just my opinion, but the snowflake hand obviously has more of a square or rectangular, a four-sided type appearance to it. And the way that that marries with square markers like it does in the Pelagos seems a little bit more fitting, at least to my eye. And so when I first looked at the Pelagos, I really enjoyed that. In terms of wearability, what I find interesting about the Pelagos is that it is so thick. And so I immediately expected it to be top heavy, for it to bounce around on my wrist. And that was something that I was worried about. But it actually fits quite snug. Its center of gravity is quite low, and it's very light given the fact that it's made out of titanium, so it doesn't move that much on my wrist. It tends to stay where it needs to go. Functionally, the Black Bay 58 obviously fits like you expect it to. The thing about the 58 is it looks almost like the perfect watch. And maybe that, for me, is actually a detriment for it, because when I look at it, I think that it looks great. Granted, I would love square markers, but it looks almost perfect. It looks pristine. It looks vintage without being too vintage, meaning that it might be tinny or cheap. It seems to be exactly what I would want in a watch. And for whatever reason, that means that it loses a little bit of magic of something that I could just beat up. And again, that's my own background. I'm in the field of construction. I'm used to having something that has a little bit of a rugged, scrappy sort of appearance. And for that reason, I think the 58 isn't the right fit for me, and it ended up not being. I used to actually own one of these, and I got rid of it, I think because for me, it lost its honeymoon appearance. And then after that, it was sort of a watch that I really liked the idea of it, but it didn't have that magic that made me want to keep putting it on. So one of the other big points that's interesting for me is actually the bracelet itself. So the Black Bay 58 has a traditional milled clasp bracelet. It has Tudor's very nice ceramic bearings for closure and for locking. Tudor Pelagos also has the same milled clasp and ceramic bearings, but it has a really nice bracelet adjustment system. It works a lot like the glide lock system that you would see on a Rolex, except it has a really nice added feature actually of a spring adjusted bracelet section. So you have 3 micro adjusts that you can set it to. The 4th position is basically a spring position where you've got 2 springs on the underside that are allowing it to flex with your hand. So as you move your hand or as your wrist swells, it flexes along with it. Now, when it's in that position, it's quite snug on your wrist. And for me, I like a very snug fit to my bracelet. I like it to actually leave very minor indents in my skin by the end of the day because it didn't move. It was very snug. So I like that. And so for me, this bracelet is basically the image of perfection because I can put this on, put it in the spring adjusted system, and I don't even think about it for the rest of the day. Whereas on a really hot summer day, if I start in the morning in an air-conditioned room with my Explorer and I go outside, by the middle part of the day, my wrist is swollen so much that that bracelet starts to get uncomfortable. So I'm gonna come out with full reviews on each watch, but if I were given the option between the Black Bay 58 or the Tudor Pelagos, for me, the Pelagos fits more of what I would expect and want out of a dive watch for me. For example, if I were going to dress up and I was going to wear a suit, my first reaction would be to pick up my nicest watch, or the one that means the most to me, which in my case is my Explorer. And so I have no need for a watch that's going to be a do-it-all, fit-all kind of watch. If you're in that situation, the Black Bay 58 might be the exact watch for you. In my case, I already have a watch that fits that need in my collection. So now I'm more in the 90% of my life where I would wear something every day and it needs to be ready to handle the rigors of what I would put it through. And so the Pelagos has a very interesting sort of appeal to it. Whether it's the dark gray nature of the titanium bracelet or the fact that it just looks like it's ready to serve a job, for whatever reason, this tends to appeal to me a lot more. And so for me, the Tudor Pelagos is a better fit for my collection and for my life. So obviously you know my answer. Like I said, I'm gonna come out with full reviews on each watch separate where I go more into specific details. But for me at least, and my collection, the Tudor Pelagos is the better fit. If you're looking for a watch to do it all, the Tudor Black Bay 58 is a wonderful fit, and it's a beautiful watch. And I'll cover that more in my separate review, but you can't really go wrong with either watch. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think? Do you think the Tudor Black Bay 58 is a better watch than the Pelagos? Is there something else that I should put against one of these? I think this Tudor Pelagos is actually gonna stay in my collection, or at least I hope to. I just have to convince the wife. So we'll see. Like this video if you like comparisons like this. I'm interested in doing some more of these with different watches that I haven't been able to see next to one another. Do me a favor and subscribe. Next Friday, I'm going to talk about the SPB 143 from Seiko. So till then, take care.